everyone, I am B.O.B. and welcome to another Minecraft tutorial, and today it's a special one! It's special because I finally hit my first milestone the other day. My subscribers have finally reached the double digits, and I know that might not seem like anything too spectacular, but you know what? It's a milestone, and I'm proud, and I appreciate all of my subscribers. So I just wanted to say thank you all so much. And as a way of showing my gratitude, I'm going to show you how I got that redstone signal all the way up there without using a torch tower or sending a redstone line or anything of the sort. Now I stumbled upon this little trick by playing around with this mechanic right here. See, I got a little bubble tube, soul sand on the bottom, just one block of water there, and then I was making gravity blocks float on top of that. And see, if you get a couple of them in here, you can actually kind of create this sort of a growing block effect, like you see there. Well, I wanted to see just how abstract I could make such an effect, and I just kept piling in these blocks until eventually that happened. The gravity blocks are broken. They're 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 not falling down anymore. And this would work with all gravity blocks if I were to place gravel or colored concrete. I'm not going to look for that now. But they would all just float in midair here. And then, well, if you were to, say, disrupt this water source somehow, or maybe get rid of the soul sand, well, then they fall down. This made me realize that wireless redstone is possible. And so I decided to look it up on YouTube, and sure enough, someone else had discovered the trick before me. Skippy6 Gaming actually did a video on this a couple of years ago, but the mechanic still works. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, as I said, Skippy6 Gaming did a video on this a couple of years ago, and I guess he learned the trick from another YouTuber by the name of Lope Gaming 731. And this is kind of how they built their transmitter, and it's actually quite a bit easier than the way that I built mine. You just got your fence post here on the end of a piston, and I use a sticky piston, so that way I can just retract it and keep reusing that same one without having to replace the blocks. But you just kind of want to make your gravity blocks float on top of that fence post. And when you're doing this, well, let me get rid of that. You want to make sure you don't place that gravity block right on top of that fence post, but a block above. See, if I placed it right here, that's no good. It's not actually a falling block there. So you want to go a block above and let it fall down. And then you can just kind of go one block up from that and just keep piling all these gravity blocks in the same spot. And then in this case, you could use any gravity block you wanted, be it colored, concrete powder or gravel. But basically, you get 20 of those blocks in one space, and that should happen right there. They'll just stop falling down. So we can use these to, well, trigger our redstone signal wirelessly. Now what I've done here is set up 3 different types of receivers, and each of these work in different ways. And I've come up with different models here, basically just to make the whole mechanic a bit more practical. See, this is the standard version. You just have your hopper with a torch sitting on top of it, and then your gravity block floating, well, a block or 2 above that. And then a comparator coming out of that hopper, feeding into whatever you wanted to feed that redstone signal to. I got a redstone lamp here. And, of course, when that block falls down, it's going to go into that hopper, and it's going to just send out a constant redstone signal. Meaning, in order to reuse this wireless receiver, you're going to have to manually reset it. And that doesn't seem all that practical to me. I mean, what's the point of a wireless receiver if you got to come up here and fix it manually anyway? So I did come up with a couple of timed models that will reset themselves. And after so many uses, you'll have to manually reset them. But, I mean, the number of uses are kind of up to you as to how many gravity blocks you place on top of these things. But this one here, it's going to use a pressure plate to catch that gravity block, and that's going to be a 5-minute redstone output. And then I got another one here that's going to shoot an arrow into a pressure plate, and that's going to give us a 1-minute redstone output. And then when the timer is up on both of these, they're going to automatically reset themselves, provided you set your transmitter back up after you use it. that's the one downfall. You will have to reset this thing every single time you use it, at least from the transmitter end of it. So, it's not too terrible. It's not too hard to do. You just place all these gravity blocks again the way you did the first time. And just keep placing them until you get that one that floats. And I find it is about the 21st block that will float. Now, I'm not going to give you an official tutorial on this standard receiver model because, I mean, you can clearly see what's going on here. Hopper, comparator, into whatever it is you're trying to power. In this case, I'm using a redstone lamp. You want a torch placed on top of that hopper, so that way when you place your gravity block above that, whenever it does fall, the torch breaks the gravity block, it falls into the hopper, sends out the signal. Easy peasy. But that's a constant redstone signal. Like I said, you'd have to manually reset that. So I'm going to give you actual tutorials on these two right here, the 5-minute and the 1-minute receivers. Now for the 5-minute receiver, everything you're going to need is in this chest right here. You're going to want at least 5 building blocks. And then I'm going to use 3 glass here, but you don't necessarily have to use glass. Basically, you'll just want to case in this pressure plate so your gravity block isn't falling off of it. So you could just use building blocks, but for demonstrative purposes, I'm using glass. Of course, you are going to need that one pressure plate. You're going to need 1 redstone repeater, 1 redstone torch, 1 piston, and some sand. Not necessarily a full stack of sand, but a couple extra pieces. The higher you stack it, obviously, the more times you can use this before you have to manually reset it. Now for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and just power redstone lamps, but obviously you can send these redstone signals into whatever device you like. But to get started here, I'm going to go ahead and place down a solid block right there. And we're going to place our pressure plate on top of that solid block, and then a repeater coming out of that solid block, feeding into another solid block. Now let's go ahead and place our redstone torch on top of that solid block. Now we want to build a little structure, so let's go ahead and place another solid block above that repeater, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap this pressure plate in. As I said before, you could just kind of pillar up and put your glass on top of there if you want to do it that way, or you could leave the blocks underneath there too if you wanted. I suppose that's fine. The important part is that you have a little closed in square right here. Okay, so from that point, you want to place another solid block on top of this one right here, and then another one on top of this redstone torch right here. So then you're going to come up on top, and above that last solid block you just placed, go ahead and place your regular piston there. And as you can see, it's powered right away by that redstone torch. And since we already have our transmitter primed over there, I can go ahead and just place our gravity block right on the face of that piston, and that's just going to stay there until we trigger our transmitter. And then our reset function will be just stacking up more gravity blocks right on top of the head of that piston, as high as you would like, of course. So now as soon as we trigger that transmitter, we let those gravity blocks finally fall down. That's going to fall onto that pressure plate, and it's going to sit there for 5 whole minutes. I mean, if you want something to be powered for just 5 minutes, that's the way to go. And then if you want something to shut off in a shorter amount of time than that, well, we'll have to go with the 1-minute receiver, and that one's just a little bit more complicated. Now for the 1-minute receiver, everything you need is in this chest right here. You're going to need 6 solid blocks of your choice, of course, 1 redstone comparator, 1 hopper, 1 chest, 1 dispenser, a pressure plate, any pressure plate will do, 1 dash redstone dust, 1 redstone repeater, a piston, 1 torch. You're going to need some arrows, probably a stack or more. Remember, every time you use this, you're going to lose one of those arrows. And also, here again, you're going to need some sand. You won't, of course, need 64 of these or nothing. It works the same way as the 5-minute one. It's however many you want to stack on top of it. And in this case, you won't actually be losing the sand. We'll be collecting it inside our chest. Now, just like with the 5-minute receiver, we're going to go ahead and start off by placing down a solid block right next to whatever it is we want to power. And we're also going to go ahead and place a pressure plate on top of that. Now, coming out of that solid block, we're going to have just a dash of redstone dust right there. And then on the top of that redstone dust, we're going to place another solid block. So it's kind of floating in there. And then we're going to place one temporary block right on top of that. And then you're probably going to want to come next to your little receiver here and just dig a little bit of hole there. And that way you can place your dispenser facing down right towards that pressure plate there. So now we can get rid of that temporary block. And we want to get our repeater, and we're going to draw a signal from that little dash of redstone dust and feed that into another solid block. And now what we want to do is have a redstone torch coming out of that right there on the outside there. So then we want to place another solid block on top of that redstone torch, another redstone torch on top of that solid block. Now before we go any further here, we're going to want to turn around, and right up against that little floating block there, you're going to want to place your chest so it's kind of right above your repeater. And then on the solid block next to that, have your comparator feeding right into that dispenser there. And then you're going to want to go ahead and crouch place your hopper feeding into that chest. Now you'll want to place your torch right on top of your hopper like so. And then we're going to come up a little bit further with this little tower. And on top of your last redstone torch placed, place another solid block. And then another redstone torch on top of that. Now we're going to want to get our piston, and we're going to want to place that right on top of that redstone torch so it's powered like so. And then have another solid block right beneath the head of that piston so you can place it right on the side of that torch just like that. And here we are with another system primed and ready, so we can take our gravity blocks, place it right on the face of that piston, as well as stack up as many as we'd like on top of the head of that piston. And then as a final step, you're going to go ahead and just throw your stack of arrows inside that dispenser. And there you go. You have yourself a 5-minute and a 1-minute receiver for your wireless redstone transmitter. And as you can see, these are all primed at the same time, so you can't have multiple transmitters in the world at a time unless you get them spread way out. But you can have multiple receivers, and they'll all be activated by that same transmitter. Now do keep in mind the 5-minute receiver, every time you're gonna use it, you're gonna lose one of these gravity blocks because it counts on that block despawning in order for that 5-minute timer to work. And then for the 1-minute receiver, you're going to lose an arrow every time you use it, which, I mean, arrows are easily replaced just like your gravity blocks are. But, I mean, here again, you're counting on that arrow to despawn in order to time out that 1 minute. Now, just as a final demonstration that all of these receivers do indeed work, I've come back over here to the transmitter. I'm going to go ahead and retract that sticky piston. Let them blocks fall. You see all the gravity blocks fall down there. And yeah, the solid redstone signal 1 lit right up, as well as our timed receivers. You got your 5-minute receiver. You see your floating entity on top of that pressure plate, as well as with your 1-minute receiver, you see the arrow stuck into that pressure plate. And say if you were to, well, pick up one of these items, well, whether it be the arrow or the entity, well, let's grab that. You see it automatically drops another block, and that's because we haven't set a receiver back up yet. And so, if you're going to continue to use those receivers, every time you trigger that transmitter, you're going to want to go ahead and set that thing back up. Otherwise, it's going to use up all your gravity blocks and all of your arrows that you have in your dispensers because, you know, it's automatically resetting themselves. And that, my friends, concludes my very first Milestone special tutorial. And as always, I do take requests for these tutorials, so if there are any contraptions or farms, machines, or whatever it is you want to see tutorials for on PS4, please let me know about that in the comments below, and I'll see if I can help you out with that. I am currently working on a wither skeleton farm for one of my subscribers. Speaking of which, Rodney, I'm still working out all the bugs on that, and I will get something up on that as soon as I possibly can. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please do remember to hit that like button, and if you're interested in seeing more from me, consider hitting that subscribe button as well. I would like to thank each and every one of you for watching, and as always, I want to wish you all a wonderful day!